Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a closer look at the Amazfit Balance smartwatch. This is a company that will always have a bit of a special place in my heart because I kicked off my own smartwatch testing journey using the Amazfit bip over 7 years ago now. Time really does fly, and back then they were still mostly known as a ecosystem affiliate brand with Xiaomi, of course very well known now for making smartphones, and they still continue to manufacture many of the Mi Bands that are extremely popular in Asia and Europe. But over the past few years, they've started to really branch out and make a name for themselves with their own label on top. And through their journey, they've created popular series including the GTR as well as the GTS, standing for round and square. We've also seen some rugged designs from them as well under the T-Rex line for folks that really want to have more water and element resistance if you're doing extreme sports outdoors. However, with this rebranding of sorts, there is really no longer the GTR and GTS series as we know it, and that's been replaced essentially by the Amazfit Balance that we have here in front of us. So what exactly is new, and is this the most polished smartwatch from Amazfit yet? We'll find out in this particular review. The watch has around 4 gigabytes of built-in storage, allowing you to run micro apps as well as store music on it, like an iPod of sorts. You're able to connect even wireless headphones to it via Bluetooth and listen to music. There still is built-in GPS, allowing you to track your route information when you're running outdoors, even without being connected to your phone, and still features this pretty large OLED round display measuring 1.5 inches diagonally, which is a little bit brighter compared to past generation models, and there's also a rotatable crown at the edge, kind of similar to the GTR and GTS 4 series from prior. It still has built-in biometric tracking, including continuous heart rate, SpO2 blood oxygen, as well as sleep tracking and step counting, of course, and they claim that the biosensors in this generation are going to be even more accurate compared to prior models. Sleep tracking is real 24/7, so if you take a nap during the day, it's going to track that as sleep for you automatically, and there's still built-in microphone and speakers for answering calls, including some voice assistants, even Alexa, that you can trigger directly on the smartwatch, similar to before. But this time around, the real improvements that Amazfit are claiming come from the software, which they're calling Zepp OS, that has a larger emphasis on AI functionality. That's kind of the buzzword in the tech world right now, and although part of that might be just hype, they say that there are more optimized improvements when it comes to giving you personalized insights of what the data that you're tracking actually means when you connect it to your phone, and you also get a more easy to use wellness score that's generated on the homepage based on how well you're resting. You can tell and see, are you able to perform the activities in the day ahead, or should you actually get more sleep and rest before you continue to do so? And diving a little bit deeper, here's a more concise list of functions that Amazfit claims are new compared to, again, prior models, all about those AI-powered guidance and recommendations. Even a AI chat model is available that you can use to ask questions to it, and it will use generative AI with a large language model to provide you with, again, more personalized insights. You can also use it now for contactless mobile payments. As part of the AI improvements in Zepp OS also allow you to intelligently reply to messages. So again, by long pressing the physical crown key, you can just say something like, "That sounds great," and it will be able to intelligently reply, which I think is a good idea because, again, with a smartwatch, you don't really have a larger display for typing things in with a keyboard. And you still have the classic, again, Alexa support for controlling smart home appliances and asking more conventional questions like, say, setting a timer if tied to your Amazon account. So it's kind of similar to having two models in the watch, a ChatGPT-like model, in addition to, again, Alexa for more routine things that you're trying to command. The Amazfit Balance now has BMI tracking capabilities for your upper body at least that can tell you your fat percentage, skeletal muscle, water percentage, protein percentage in your body just by wearing the watch. The watch still retails for around $230 at a very similar price point to past GTR and GTS series watches, which I think is competitive for the features that it's touting, and battery life still remains pretty good. It can last for around 14 days if you're in the eco-saving mode, although certain features like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth may be more restricted there. Under normal usage with continuous automatic tracking of data, I found it closer to around 1 week before I had to recharge it, but that's still better than, say, the Apple Watch that needs to be charged pretty much every other night. That being said, with the brand now starting to gain a larger market share, it looks like some of the other functions are starting to be gridded off into separate compartments, which I'm not perhaps the biggest fan of. For example, they have another kind of AI function called Zep Aura that's supposed to give you even more insights when it comes to sleep. Other playlists can be generated for moods and usages like meditation purposes combined with some haptics on the watch. This is completely optional, and it will still tell you hours slept, light versus deep versus REM, even without the subscription, but using the subscription can get you even deeper insights. But again, it requires kind of a separate cost. In addition, there's something called Zep Coach, which is the aforementioned AI-powered personal trainer that will kind of give you some courses that you can activate from the watch. It will speak to you if you're connecting to wireless headphones based on how you're performing. However, this is another function that requires another subscription. So these are all separate as opposed to kind of a direct upfront payment or perhaps some type of plan that bundles in all of those services together. Crafted out of a fusion of Gorilla Glass as well as alloy materials on the frame that makes it still feel quite sturdy. It's still going to be fully waterproof up to 5 ATMs, so if you're going swimming and diving with it, it will still fully survive, and it can track, again, many sports and activities. Pretty much everything that you can possibly want to label can be found here, and it can even activate automatically at certain sessions like light running and jogging. If it detects that you're moving, it will record it for you as part of those AI features. The built-in GPS this time around also has slightly improved mapping capabilities. You're able to download offline maps into the device's memory, similar to storing Google Maps offline, and it takes up a little bit more space, but you can then track that even if you're not connected to, say, Wi-Fi. The watch, by the way, though, still does not have any cellular capabilities. Also, aside from the Zep app, you can also sync data over to other services, including Apple Health, Google Fit, so on and so forth, which are popular if you want to export your data. And like prior generation models, it will give you automatic alerts if your heart rate, stress level is over a certain threshold to kind of notify you that you should probably pay attention to that. That being said, one sensor that hasn't been added onto the balance would be blood pressure monitoring, even though that's mostly estimated on all of the PPG-based sensor watches, which makes accurate blood pressure still kind of niche, aside from models like the BP Doctor line that we've checked out as well recently. Alright, so inside of the packaging, aside from the smartwatch, we of course have a charger, and there is just a quick user guide, in addition to kind of a quick card that just says daily reminder, telling you to take 3 deep breaths, drink water, work out, be grateful, as kind of a wellness card there. The charger, by the way, is magnetic. However, it's different from past generation watches, so they're not going to be backwards compatible if you own those prior models, unfortunately, although it attaches pretty easily onto the back of the watch, and the entire watch tops up in around just an hour. The design, again, is quite elegant, and on the back we have just the various biometric sensors, the charging contacts, as well as the loudspeaker and microphone on the edge. It's crafted out of kind of this polycarbonate material on the rear to make it slightly more comfortable on your skin. It's relatively breathable. You can swap it out for other colors and textures if you prefer something more classy, or a fabric type strap instead. Now perhaps the only slight con here is the strap doesn't really fold all the way flat, as you can tell there. It sits at this slight angle as part of this new design. Compared to some of the prior generation models, the mechanism for the straps could actually rotate and pivot a little bit, so it could actually lie flat. I only point that out because when you are charging it with the cradle, it's a little harder to lie it down here on a table like so, and as a result, in most cases, due to this strap design, you'll be setting the watch on the side, because otherwise it's just not going to lie flat. However, it doesn't really rotate the information to display sideways, and so the info is kind of at an awkward angle. You have access to the crown key up top, which is going to be fully rotatable. You can press it once to jump into a full list of applications on the watch, zoom in and zoom out, very similar to the original Apple Watch there in design, and then tap once to go back. The bottom key is pre-programmed to open the entire list of sports activities that you can jump into at a simple click. So you can also long hold for a few seconds to activate the voice assistant, although this can be remapped, customized to another function that you can set under the advanced settings. Overall, the watch I think is pretty attractive in its design. It's not going to be anything too flashy, although there are some slight accents, and the display also has a slight protrusion from the edges, making it feel a little bit more smooth as you're swiping from all of the corners and edges. And again, the OLED nature makes the colors, especially blacks, and the contrast really does pop as you are interacting with the panel. Here's also a final size comparison with, again, some other prior models, the GTR series. Here we have a Mob Voice smartwatch that is running on Android Wear that you can tell is going to be substantially thicker as well as heavier. Many of these watch dials that you can long hold for a couple of seconds to switch between also have an additional edit button at the bottom that can be triggered for you to customize individual tiles on the display, or aka widgets. If you wanted to show something else instead, you can easily tap on it and find the full list of applications to customize these dials further versus other ones which are a bit more digital that you can find on board. Otherwise, the UI feels pretty fluid and responsive, which is not too surprising because that's one of the quality of life improvements that they started to work on, really starting with the past generation or two of watches, and the same remains here. Swiping down still gives us access to some quick shortcuts, including the automatic screen brightness for the display that you can also cover up with your hand. If you are also putting it into your pocket, the screen can automatically turn off. We've got a theater, aka do not disturb mode, also for sound, and there is a flashlight. Change it into a red color, as you can tell there. If you are trying to illuminate some objects in the dark, it acts as a decent little quick shortcut. And you can also have a speaker water eject function that's kind of borrowed from Apple Watches, but it plays back a high vibration sound if you've just finished diving or taking a shower to eject any water particles from the speaker grills to make the audio sound sharp again and connect to headphones as well. So pretty standard stuff. Swiping up will tell you any notifications that you can tap inside to read. Now we can swipe through the carousel. The next tab over will tell you steps and times you've stood up during the day. You can tap inside to tell a little bit more information. And again, all the animation work is done pretty well. You can scroll up and down using the dial without too many issues. Swipe back to go to the prior page, all quite similar to previous smartwatches. Continuous heart rate can be tracked during the day to give you a map, as well as weather information. Now it can hold around 2 to 3 days of weather info before the data kind of elapses and expires. So for the most up-to-date weather data, you do have to ideally sync it with your smartphone. And final page over is going to be the card view. Similar to on Android smartphones, you're able to activate features including playing back some music, as well as some recommended previously open apps, some of the other alarm information, sleep data here at a glance that you can scroll through to check out. Blood oxygen monitoring, by the way, can now also be measured automatically during the day, as long as it's recognized that you aren't being too vigorous in your movements. This is also an improvement compared to past sensors, which required you to manually take a measurement by being very still, and the, again, accuracy and speed of that sensor is just a little faster this time around. And jumping into the full list of advanced settings, under display you can also trigger the always-on mode for the OLED screen, and there are different styles that you can find that are built into the device's memory. You can follow the general style of the current watch face, or of course you can set your own, and you can again turn this on or off, or select a smart mode that will only turn on during the waking hours and then turn it off at night if you're not using it to consume a little bit less power. But because of the OLED nature of the screen, you're only consuming power when the pixels are being turned on, and when it's displaying something black, it's not using quite as much juice. So it just shows a little bit more of a simplified layout and still is decent enough. You can also activate the raise to wake function or gesture, so when you lift up the watch, it turns on automatically, playing around with those settings there. Now, you can also take a look at turning off certain features in a more granular way under the battery manager. For example, the blood oxygen, stress, sleep, breathing monitoring, any of these functions turn on or off will allow you to have a slightly longer battery life. Even the main UI can also be changed back into a list format if you prefer instead of the grid. Here's a quick example of the voice assistants in action, starting with Zepp Flow. Turn up the brightness. And again, using some of these system-wide prompts, it tells that it has increased the screen brightness in this example. Alternatively, what is the time in New York? It'll provide you with some more intelligent answers, as you can tell there. Create a 3-day itinerary for visiting Las Vegas. And there we have it. Again, it's able to generate some of these more intelligent, summarized information, and really not bad, with decent enough accuracy, I'd say. There is no image generation on here, but for text generation, the voice input also seems to be accurate enough, as you can tell there. We can also verify that the Amazfit Flow behind the scenes is indeed powered by OpenAI, as you can tell there. So it really is just leveraging ChatGPT, maybe with some slight personalization done by them on top of it. And that personalization primarily extends to UI integration with the watch. So for example, again, turning on the screen brightness, as well as the ability for you to send notifications. Prior Amazfit watches already started to experiment with a offline voice control assistant. So even if it's not connected to Wi-Fi, nor connected to your phone, it's still able to access certain controls, including changing the screen brightness, as well as opening up certain apps, setting a basic alarm and timer, just by using kind of a flicking motion with your wrist, as you can tell there. So this offline voice assistant is still baked into this watch. So it's kind of a backup now, since there is already that Zepflow OpenAI, but again, this as well as Alexa both require internet connectivity and might consume a little bit more power. But that basic, very primitive voice model that's offline is still built on in. So already by default, you have 3 different voice control assistants on the watch for both offline and online use. So this is really voice assistant galore on this particular generation of smartwatch. I also think a form factor like this makes it perhaps an alternative or even a killer of the Rabbit R1 and also the Humane AI Pen, which, if you guys have been following, are these kind of new evolving forms of AI-powered gadgets that's meant to be a companion device, not really replacing your smartphone, but all powered by ChatGPT inside. But honestly, it doesn't really make sense because you still have to carry those devices with you in addition to your regular say phone at the end of the day, because they are pretty limited in what you can access. But this doesn't really try to reinvent the wheel per se. You are still likely going to be carrying around a watch anyways on your wrist. This can tell you the time. It's still as sleek and compact as any other smartwatch that can track your biometrics and health data at the end of the day, but in addition, giving you some of those AI-based controls with ChatGPT inside. So this form factor, I think, just makes a lot more sense. Now again, tapping once on the crown, more mini apps you're able to download and install on the watch locally. So that is, again, an improvement that makes it feel closer than ever to a Android Wear or Apple Watch. Of course, the list of applications is still going to be smaller by contrast because it's more of a proprietary OS compared to both of those other platforms having more players and been around for a little bit longer as well. But of course, it's much better than not having it. Additional apps here include a built-in thermometer that can recognize your skin temperature as you are wearing it. Simple functions like a stopwatch and timer are built in directly, in addition to a dialer pad for making calls. Again, if you are connected to your phone via Bluetooth, that is, this acting as a remote. Here is the simple MP3 player that you're able to also, again, control whether you want audio to come out from the speakers or using wireless headphones. And you can add more tracks using the companion app, pushing it over, and so on and so forth, including calendar functionality that you can tap to see more info, mapping functionality, a compass that's also going to be available here just by rolling this ball around using the built-in accelerometers, which are typically used for motion tracking, also telling you your relative air pressure and also elevation using some of the built-in sensors there. And some of the other apps that you see are going to be ones that I downloaded again from the store, including a tic-tac-toe game that you're able to play using the AI that also has haptics on board that will vibrate to give you some basic alerts. So again, these are going to be quite simple. They're nothing super sophisticated, but overall, since the processor in a smartwatch, it's not going to be as advanced as a smartphone, of course. It still is impressive that you have some of these very light, quick puzzle-type titles, if you are really bored, that you can kind of play back. Here I've also downloaded a simple Pong game that is also using the crown here to rotate. And aside from the recovery score, you're also going to still find the classic Pi score that was on even some of their earlier generation models. That's more of a consolidated score between 1 and 100 based on how active you are. This doesn't really take into account how well you're resting, but things like number of calories you've burned, as well as distance you've walked, met your goal. You can also set up simple alarms to, of course, ring and remind you on the watch itself. Other mini apps are essentially small courses or exercise sessions, such as this one here that tells you to exercise your spine by kind of sitting upright, and it will give you some basic instructions and tell you kind of the position that you should be in as you are starting this particular activity, and afterwards then it will tell you to move and then kind of change into a different position. So some of those apps, including yoga, spine workout, are going to be free, but they will take up a separate tile here under the main list of applications that you can find. This one's also going to tell you your moon phases as well as tide phases in your nearby location once you're connected to the internet. And again, since it has built-in Wi-Fi, you don't have to necessarily be paired to your phone 24/7 for it to refresh the data. If it's able to connect to, again, Wi-Fi, it will be able to do that as well. You can also record some basic voice memos, again, using the watch's built-in 4 gigs of memory, using it as a recorder for notes, meetings, things like that. A separate tile here for sleep also gives you, again, a little bit more of a closer breakdown of any naps you've taken, as well as the stages of sleep, percentages there. And you can also tap on this meditation tab to give you some other activities, including sleeping as well as focusing, that will give you slightly different haptic frequencies of the device here vibrating, either to alert you if you're trying to be staying focused, not fall asleep, versus relaxing. It will try to activate some of the slower rhythms to soothe your parasympathetic nervous system. You can also find a breakdown of all of your different activities and sports that you've been using on the watch, including a small route that will be shown if you have activated GPS, your average speed, as well as heart rate zone that you can more closely track on the companion app once the data is synced over. A basic to-do list can also be pushed over from the companion app and also refreshed, including world clock information can also be shown. There's also a separate little app here that tells you your storage space consumption that you can also break down to see how things are being utilized on the watch's built-in memory. Here's also a Find My Phone function that will kind of vibrate your phone if it's connected via Bluetooth, that is. And kind of last but not least, you can also take a look at your training information, specifically for more vigorous gym and sports, your VO2 max, as well as recovery time info there as well. So you still get some of those classic, more detailed metrics that we saw from before, but those are just tucked away a little bit more under the advanced full list of functions on board. And here's also a final look at the different sports activities, again over 150, for pretty much everything that you'll possibly want, including even different types of dance can all be labeled, so when you are reviewing your data later on, you'll know if you were doing disco versus, say, breakdancing, something like that, and you'll be able to track continuously your heart rate, calories burned during those workout sessions. Now, the antenna reception quality of GPS is also, for the most part, working quite well. It's slightly improved, I think, compared to some of the past generation models. So after you activate a session, you can tell how the GPS pretty much gets locked within around just 10 seconds in my testing, even though right now we are indoors. So it's actually quite strong. And when I reviewed the map information with a Apple Watch and compared it, I found that it was actually quite close when it comes to the overall route that gets tracked. So really not bad if you're using it as a GPS watch. When it came to heart rate, step counting, as well as sleep, they were all actually very close and quite accurate when I was comparing those metrics. So here is the Zepp companion app, which we have seen in, again, their prior wearables. The UI, though, is pretty easy to understand. You're able to find tiles for all of the breakdowns, including the readiness score, and also check out more stats on here, including, for example, the HRV score is too high, and it's better to, for example, take it easy today. All of these, if you tap inside the tiles, will provide you with more detail as compared to on the watch, of course, which was much more small. Here's a quick demo of the Zepp Aura in practice. So again, some of those more personalized AI meditation and sleep sessions that you can start on here. Once that starts playing back, you'll hear the sound coming out from the phone speaker, but on the watch, it will be activating the stress as well as the heart rate tracking to tell you how relaxed you are and give you a score there. You can play and pause to track at any time. And under the final profile tab, you're able to change the watch dials. So there are going to be hundreds of options, but this is another area where, again, some of those secret upcharges are starting to creep up. Because I remember when Amazfit first hit the scene, pretty much every single watch dial, maybe with just 1 or 2 exceptions, were completely free. But now it seems like actually it's the opposite. The majority of other custom watch dials are going to be costly. It's going to sell for around $199, which for just a digital watch dial I do think is actually quite on the expensive side. You can still find a sprinkle of free options, and more importantly, your custom watch faces that you can customize using your own photo as a wallpaper is completely free. We're also able to go into the full micro app store, again, for downloading additional content. Some of them are going to be costing a little bit. As you can tell, they're similar to on an Apple Watch or Android Wear watch for that matter, but the majority of micro apps are still thankfully going to be on the free side. They are categorized by different genres, including games that you can find, which is slowly growing compared to when this store was first introduced. It's still not going to be extremely exhaustive, but you can find, again, different types of learning apps, translation apps, as well as a couple of utility tools from controlling things like Sonos smart speakers, as well as Spotify, acting as a remote controller, a bubble level tool, HTTP, as well as basic wallet functions, so on and so forth can all be found on here. By the way, you can only connect to one smartwatch at a time, however, under a single account. So if you have multiple smartwatches, I think that mostly makes sense so that the data doesn't really overlap or gets duplicated. But just keep that in mind. So when connecting to a new watch, it has to first disconnect from the prior watch. That being said, all of your data then gets saved over to the current watch when it comes to your height and your current weight information. So it gets calibrated based on your own profiles, and that kind of information gets carried into the current watch that you're using. So pretty fast to sync and kind of stay connected with your data once you are setting it up. And then finally, under the section down below here, you can purchase some of the optional subscription plans, including the Zepp Aura and the Zepp Fitness. Again, those two which are going to be optional, although you have a free trial when you're first setting it up. So that is more or less it as far as our closer look, complete walkthrough really of the Amazfit Balance. And in summary, I would say that the hardware here, from a tracking perspective, all the biosensors are definitely the most accurate compared to prior generations. GPS is also now extremely fast to stay connected. New selling point here is integration with all of those small software enhancements, primarily I would say Zepp Flow with the kind of ChatGPT integration being the biggest highlight out of the bunch. It just makes it feel a little bit more intelligent, especially since it has, again, built-in Wi-Fi. You're able to pretty easily use it, actually working a little bit better than I expected. That being said, there are still small areas, including some of the increased number of membership options, not to mention the increased number of pay-to-use watch dials for customization. I think is also not perhaps the best look in the world, considering that the watch's price hasn't really dropped too significantly. I mean, I can understand on certain devices in order to break even, for example, on some of the classic Xiaomi phones back in the day, when they first debuted, they were so low cost, similar to on Amazon Fire tablets, that it doesn't even cover the hardware of the product. So they have to give you ads or some way for them to kind of make that money back. But that's not really the case anymore. So those are some side corners which I do think hopefully they can be more cautious of going forward. But as a whole, performance of the watch is excellent. The data is easy to manage and track, no issues with syncing, and again, the Zepp Flow part I do quite like. Combined with very good battery life, I think still makes it quite attractive. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been a closer look at the pretty interesting current generation Amazfit Balance.